She didn't say a word for 4 days in that courtroom. There was no reaction when the recording played. There was no reaction when the financial papers were shown as evidence. There was no reaction when a room full of people who had watched her life on TV for 17 years read aloud her own letter, which she had written herself and sealed with her own silence. She just stayed there, in the second row, not moving at all, not at all readable. Everyone thought that meant she was keeping him safe. They were not right. On the 5th morning, Meri Brown stood up and looked at a judge, a courtroom, and the man she had given 30 years of her life to. She said the 3 words that no amount of money, manipulation, or carefully constructed family mythology could take back. Christine Brown finally cried when she said them, even though she hadn't cried in 5 days of testimony. This isn't the same Sister Wives story you saw on TV. This is the one that was going on behind the scenes, behind the confessionals, under the smiles, inside the financial papers that were never meant to be seen, the recordings that were never meant to be made, and the promises that were never meant to be put to the test in court. But they were. And now, every one of them has to answer for it. Leave a comment right now and let me know. Did you ever think it would get this bad? You will never look at a single frame of that show the same way again after reading this story. Kody Brown comes in last. He's gotten older. If you haven't seen him in person since the last seasons of the show, you might be surprised by how much. His hair is still the same, a wild mane that is now silver at the temples, and still worn with the stubborn confidence of a man who has never quite accepted that time applies to him. But his face has something heavier on it, something that makeup and camera angles couldn't hide for long. He has lines around his eyes that weren't there in season 1. A tightness around the jaw that doesn't show strength, but rather a man who has been clenching his teeth for years, holding something in that is finally ready to come out. He walks in next to his lawyer, Richard Hale, who is a sharp-edged man who specializes in high-asset family law. He carries himself with the confidence of someone who has won tough cases before and expects to win this one too. Kody walks down the gallery aisle with his chin slightly raised, like a man who has been filmed, watched, and the center of attention in every room he has entered for the past 20 years. Old ways of doing things. The cameras aren't here today, at least not inside. But his body hasn't gotten the message yet. His eyes scan the room. They go over the reporters. They walk past Janelle's sons, who are sitting in a row like quiet witnesses to history. They see the evidence table for a split second, and then they see Christine. She still doesn't look at him. Something moves over his face. Not mad. Not the kind of frustration that people who watched the show were used to. Something smaller and more real than that. Something that, if you look closely enough, looks a lot like grief. Or maybe it's fear dressed up as grief. He takes a seat, fixes his tie. He opens a folder that he doesn't read. The man who walked into this courtroom thinking he was in charge of the story is about to find out that it was never really his to tell. She talks about the family's early years, how money was supposed to work or how it really worked. She says that in a plural marriage, especially one that the law doesn't recognize, there are no built-in protections, no rights that come with it. You work on trust. You think that the head of this family sees all of you the same way. You believe in what you do. Then she says, in a soft but clear voice, I stopped believing in that plan sometime around 2015. The courtroom is very quiet. Voss wants her to explain. Christine takes a deep breath, but not a nervous one. What comes next isn't a speech. It's not practiced like closing arguments are. It sounds like something she's thought about a lot since she left, in the dark, at night, and finally named things she didn't want to name for a long time. She talks about a certain time, but it's not a dramatic one, like a fight or a formal announcement. It's just Tuesday. At a budget meeting in Las Vegas, she asked a simple question about how much money they spent on things around the house, and there was a 3-second silence before anyone answered. For 3 seconds, she watched Kody look at Robyn before he spoke. 3 seconds in which she knew, deep down, that the information she was about to get had already been filtered. It had already been decided. She wasn't taking part in this conversation. She was just listening to it. She says, "I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself that for about 6 more years." The woman in the back row, who is a journalist, stops typing for a second. There is something about the way Christine says that, without bitterness, not even sadness anymore, but with the flat, clear tone of someone reading a fact from a page. That is worse than tears. You can ignore tears. Tears can be called emotional, fake, or over the top. This can't. This is a woman who has already mourned, who came today not to cry about what happened, but to make sure it was written down. And in a courtroom, everything is recorded. There is a way to show evidence in a courtroom. There are speakers that need to be tested, volume levels that need to be adjusted, and a transcript that needs to be given to the judge. There are also times when the procedure takes longer than it should, which can be very frustrating for everyone in the room who is waiting to hear what is on the recording. It lasts for 11 minutes. Kody Brown stares at a fixed point on the wall in front of him for 11 minutes without moving. Doesn't talk to his lawyer in a low voice. He doesn't fix his tie, move around in his seat, or do any of the little things that a man who is comfortable does. He sits still in a way that shows he knows what's going to happen. He probably heard that recording in his head since Janelle's lawyer first filed it as evidence, and he's been thinking about how his face will look when it plays in public for weeks. He has chosen to be neutral. He is working very hard to be neutral. There is a crackling sound from the speakers, then calm down. And then a kitchen from 3 years ago fills the room. You can hear it all. The specific sounds of a home that has been on TV. Somehow you can almost picture the layout, the lighting, and the way the family always sat around that table with the careful choreography of people who had learned to manage closeness. The refrigerator hums softly, the gentle movement of someone moving in a chair, the background noise of a family that still thought they would make it through that Tuesday night. Then Kody spoke. Not the voice from the TV. The one that had been carefully modulated over 17 seasons of confessionals and producer-guided conversations. This is the other sound. The one that comes out when the cameras are off, and the choices are real, and there is no editing room to make things better. People thought it would be louder, more sure. That makes it worse. He says, "This way. The deed is cleaner. Robyn and I talked about it. Legally, it just makes more sense for it to be us. It protects everyone. Keeps everyone safe." The journalist in the back row writes something down in her notebook. One of Janelle's sons is staring at the ceiling. Christine, who is on the stand, has closed her eyes, not because of the words, but because she already knew what they were going to say. Next, Janelle's voice comes through, strong and clear, asking the question that any reasonable person would ask. Then comes the pause, the one on the recording that probably lasted 2 seconds in real life, but feels like it lasts a year in this courtroom. This isn't about who owns what. It's about trust, not legal ownership. And trust is no longer a comfort in this room with this evidence on this table. It is the gun. Because that's what this recording shows at its core. It's not just a financial decision or a deed filed in 2 names instead of 4. It shows how it works. The specific way control was kept was not through anger or violence, but through something much more effective and much harder to prove. Using language. By changing the frame. By making a choice that helped 2 people and then confidently calling it protection for everyone. Voss stops the recording. She lets the silence after it do its thing. She doesn't hurry to talk. She doesn't have to. The words are already there. Once something is in a courtroom, it stays there. Robyn Brown has always been the most talked about person in the Sister Wives story. The 4th wife. The one who came in when the family was already set up, already stretched, and already had the quiet cracks that careful editing and TV lighting had kept hidden for years. She was the new person who became the center. In the eyes of many, the addition took something away from the women who were already there. She knows how people feel about her. For more than 10 years, she has lived with that knowledge. She has cried about it on camera, defended herself against it in confessionals, and seen comment sections and fan forums make her out to be a villain in a story she says she never chose to be in. You can see this much about Robyn Brown. She has been seen as the problem for years, and as a result, she has developed an almost architectural composure. Softness piled on top of each other to make armor. She walks to the stand in a dove-gray dress with her dark hair down around her shoulders. She looks smaller than she does on TV, more like a person, not as much made. The question that everyone in this room is thinking about is whether that quality is real vulnerability or a carefully planned performance of it. The answer, depending on what you believe about Robyn Brown, changes everything about what her testimony means. She takes the oath. She straightens her dress once, then folds her hands on the railing in front of her with the carefulness of someone who has practiced this exact move. Voss walks up slowly, almost softly. How you deal with something that might bolt. The first questions help to establish facts. Yes, the deed has her name on it. Yes, she knew when it was filed. Yes, she knew that Christine and Janelle were not a part of it. This is where Robyn does something that surprises everyone. She doesn't move away from it. She doesn't immediately use the language of family unity and spiritual protection that Kody's testimony will rely on a lot. She just agrees with it. In a quiet way. Straight. It seems like she's been waiting, maybe even longer than this trial, to stop pretending that the deal was something other than what it was. And that quiet yes that wasn't defended hit harder than a no would have. It tells you that Robyn Brown already knows exactly how this looks, even though she is calm and wearing a dove-gray dress. She has always known. Voss lets the confirmations pile up. The act, the date of the filing, the talks with Kody about how things are set up. Each yes builds on the last, making something planned and unavoidable. There is very little movement in the gallery. Kody's lawyers have even stopped writing. After that, Voss changes her position slightly, like a pianist does before changing keys. She then asks about the benefit. Ms. Brown, did that deal help you in any way? And here is where the composure starts to show its first signs of weakness. Not a collapse, nothing that obvious. Just a tiny bit of hesitation. You can see Robyn looking for the answer that is both honest and safe for half a second. And then you see that those two things are not in the same place right now. She says, I trusted Kody to make choices that were fair for all. She means it with all her heart. And that's the worst part. Christine and Janelle used to say those same things. In confessionals. At the kitchen table. In the quiet dark of their own thoughts. They also trusted him. And they are sitting across from each other in this courtroom to show what that trust cost them. Voss doesn't push right away. She lets Robyn's answer sit next to Christine's testimony, Janelle's spreadsheet, and the recording that still seems to echo off these walls. She lets the gallery, the journalists, and the history being written in real time do the work that no follow-up question could do as well. After that, she asks about the letter. And the room, which has been tense and on edge all morning, finally breaks. Hale goes into the document, comes up to Robyn, asks her to double-check the handwriting, the date, and the person who got it. Yes, she does. Her eyes move to the letter, and something behind them changes. A door closes or a calculation is finished, and she says it in a voice that has lost its careful softness for the first time today. The key line is written down in the record. The words about keeping assets safe from legal problems. From wives who might decide to leave. Not written by Kody. Not Robyn. But the woman in the middle row, who everyone thought would stay quiet, is now the most important person in this whole courtroom, according to the math of this moment. The gavel comes down, but the sound it makes isn't that important. Because the story has changed shape completely, and everyone in this room is trying to figure out what it looks like now. Ms. Brown, now that you know what you know about the deed, the money, and the letter you wrote, do you think Christine and Janelle were treated fairly? This is the easiest question asked in this courtroom all week. The main question was whether they were treated fairly. No legal problems, no terms related to money. There is no need to break down definitions or question documentation. Anyone who has ever been in a family, whether it's a big family or a small one, will understand this question right away and completely. Still, Meri has been sitting with it longer than any other question today. She stares at the table in front of her. Her jaw moves a little, not with emotion, but with the same care that a surgeon uses to pick the right tools. With care, knowing exactly what each one will cut. The room is waiting. You need to know how much this moment means to her. Not legally. Her lawyer has already carefully answered all of the questions about liability, how much it costs her. For most of the last 30 years, Meri Brown has lived in a place that asked her to be loyal above all else. The currency was loyalty. Loyalty was what made a good plural wife different from a bad one, and a woman who cared about her family different from a selfish one. She was the first wife. The first one. The person who agreed to share her husband before sharing became a normal part of the family's language. And in return for that huge, life-changing agreement, she got something. Not a deed. Not a promise of money. Something that wasn't as real and, as it turned out, wasn't as strong. She was known for being faithful, of being the one who stayed behind. And now, in a room full of reporters, lawyers, and cameras waiting outside, with the man she built her adult life around sitting 15 feet away, she is being asked to say out loud what her silence has kept safe for years. She looks up. Her eyes meet Christine's. And this is what the cameras outside can't see, what the court transcript won't show, and what even the reporters typing furiously in the back row will have a hard time putting into words later. The look that passes between these two women is not dramatic. It's not the tense, movie-like scene where enemies become friends, like in documentary films when the music gets louder. It's not that loud. More than that. It is the look of two people who used to sit in the same kitchen, raise kids in the same neighborhood, share holidays and heartbreaks, and deal with the unique exhaustion of loving a complicated man. They then spent years on opposite sides of a divide that neither of them fully chose. Now, on a rainy Thursday morning in this fluorescent-lit courtroom, they are finally in the same place again. Christine's face doesn't ask for anything. Doesn't ask, beg, or pressure. It is just open. No matter what Meri says, that openness seems to say, I will still know who you are. Meri looks at her for 3 seconds. Then she looks back at the judge. She says, no. They weren't. And in those 3 words, which are the shortest answer given in this courtroom all week, Meri Brown does something that no financial document, audio recording, or expert testimony has been able to do with the same level of accuracy. She makes it human. She makes it clear. She takes the spreadsheets, the deed, the recording, and the letter, and boils them all down to their most basic, unchangeable truth. They were not given a fair chance. The one person in this family who had every reason to stay quiet said it. Anyway, said. The journalist in the back row has stopped writing altogether. She is just listening now, like you do when you know you're in a moment that will matter later. One of Janelle's sons has lowered his head a little, with his chin resting on his chest, as if he is letting go of something he has been holding on to for a long time. And Kody Brown, who has kept his calm, neutral face through recordings, spreadsheets, and heartbreaking testimony, looks for just a moment like a man who finally understands what he built. Not the family he talked about in confessionals. Not the spiritual agreement he talked about in interviews. The shape that is real. The one that can only be seen when it breaks. And now it is broken. In the one place where breaking can't be cut out.